Hello and welcome to the Shula Bowl edition of Inside the Burrow, the FAU podcast for and by fans. My name is Dan. I'm joined as usual by Jack and Shane, and we will be having an FIU guest later on. Yeah, this is officially the 18th Shula Bowl between Florida International and Florida Atlantic. This FAU has dominated this. Really hasn't been close for many years. FIU, I think, had a two-game. They won 2 years in a row in 2008 and 9 and 10, something like that. But yeah, always fun I think more fun for FAU fans than FIU fans for sure. Since we tend to be the winners and we tend to be the ones that show up more. But this one is still a big game. Again, we mentioned last week, beating Western Kentucky enabled FAU to continue to play meaningful games more than just for bowl eligibility. But this is a big game for FAU, and FIU reeling a little bit. They had a rough loss. Last week against Middle Tennessee, and we may talk a little bit about that. But I don't know, Shane, what's your since you also do a Shula Bowl podcast that we'll probably mention a couple times throughout this episode. What's your initial take on this FIU team?
Just for the record keeping, we won in 08 and 09. Actually, 08 being probably the greatest Shula Bowl.
Oh, how could I forget that?
I mean, we lost in 2010 and 11. It was that.
Yeah.
Glad Howard's 2011 and 2012. Excuse me. Towards the end of Schnellenberger there, but yes, they're absolutely reeling right now. I mean, they struggled to beat Old Dominion. Old Dominion started a true freshman quarterback last week. Nothing has gone right for them. Even worse in a way, some people want to make the comparison how it was to us last year. They were preseason favorites. They had James Morgan coming back. They all preseason offensive and defensive players of the year. And nothing has seemed to gone right, but they've not lost a lot of close games. They lost by 2 touchdowns at Louisiana Tech. Middle Tennessee ran for nearly 500 yards against them. Their run defense has been a problem going back to almost like the entire Butch era. They've just not been able to figure out how to stop the run. It's a very difficult thing to do in Conference USA. So their fan base is just kind of down right now for where they were at the beginning of the year. And it's kind of disappointing because, we talk about on that other podcast all the time and we've talked about on here, and Jack kind of makes fun of me for it. Is like, we want this game to be meaningful. It'd be cool if they say this is for the East, winner wins the East, but it's not. This is a game where FAU's 10.5-point favorites. And if we win by 10.5 points, I'll be kind of disappointed. This is a game we should win by 20 points based on how FIU is playing right now.
For sure.
Why stop at 20? Why not 28?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
let's go like Akron, right?
No,
47.
Last year, Lane was running read options with Rafe Peavy, was running balls into the end zone with 2 minutes left in the game last year. Lane knows. We've talked about this a little bit, the FIU people, and this is a game where Lane can separate himself from Butch. They were hired together. They were kind of compared. Even after last year, the first 2 years, Lane had one good year. Then FIU kind of came back and had a nice year last year. Lane had the Conference USA title and both head-to-head victories. But, I think FIU had one more overall win. Both programs seem to be on the up and up. FIU's schedule is really difficult to finish the year. Us, a neutral, quote-unquote, site game versus Miami, and then at Marshall and Huntington. So there's a chance that they're not going to become bowl eligible, similar to we were last year. But they've gotten blown out a lot of games. If we win and we go on to make the Conference USA East title, Lane has established himself above Bush in kind of this little FAU head-to-head, with these two coaches.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting there, and this may have continued to go in opposite directions. but somebody posted the records of the coaches hired in 2017, and Butch was not that much. I think he was 2 games behind Lane. I think Butch has had more mediocre success consistently, and we went crazy, and had a ton of wins in Lane's first year, and then kind of backtracked a little bit last year. But I thought that was interesting. If you were looking just at records, you would be like, oh wow, it's actually closer than what it is. But I think in reality, it feels like Lane has already kind of distanced himself.
And just Lane has some big wins under his belt. Butch really doesn't. I mean, they've
outside of the bowl win. I mean,
outside of the bowl game, and Eric Henry, who we have on the show later, kind of became friends through Twitter because I criticized FIU last year, and I said the only thing that really separated FAU and FIU last year is we had to play Louisiana Tech and go to North Texas last year, while they got Rice and UTSA, two of the bottom teams in the West. And I said that was the difference between us being bowl eligible and them not, because they were hounding us for not being bowl. And, FAU lost a lot of close games last year. And if you, you look at FIU this year, they've gotten blown out in some Conference USA games and played some teams closer than they have should have not. So, but again, this could really separate these two coaches. I mean, this would be if FAU was having just how I saw FAU fans react when we lost to Marshall at home. If FAU was having this type of season right now, FAU fans would be burning stuff down. People would be really angry.
Yeah, this year's game of the Shula Bowl reminds me a lot of last year, 2018 season, just with the roles reversed. Last year, it seemed like FAU was kind of limping into the game, not expecting to pick up a result on the road, while FIU was in the hunt to win Conference USA East. Remember, they were actually the number 1 team in the division at this point, at a lot going into last year's Shula Bowl. So because of that, I am a bit worried, knowing that it is a rivalry game, so you never know what can happen. That being said, I feel like last year's FAU team is better than this year's FIU team. You know what I mean by that? Because the roles are reversed from last year to this year. Their rushing defense, guys, is bad. We've been talking about it for so long now. It's ranked 109th out of the 130 FBS teams. That's when it comes to total rushing yards. That's not including yards per rush. And that makes them about 119th, 118th, around there. The game against Old Dominion, I was listening to the Shula Bowl podcast, Shane, that you guys posted a couple days ago. And David, the FIU guy, was saying, look, if I could take any positive out of this game, it's that our defense played well. Well, congratulations. Your defense played well against the worst offense in the entire nation with a true freshman quarterback at the helm. And that's what you're taking away from it, that your defense played well. I'm happy that, there are 200 fans in attendance, had something to cheer about, but this is just one of those games where you just see a dog that's dying in a street and you just put a bullet in its brain just to end it. You know what I mean? I'm sorry if that's morbid, but they have Miami next. They have Marshall next. Let's put the dog down. Let's do them a favor. Let's don't get their hopes up about becoming bowl eligible.
Little extreme, but yeah, sure. The things that worry me about this game is, yes, kind of the team limping in. I do think them playing Miami the next week, if you, like I pointed out on Twitter this week, if anyone follows me, how FAU athletics seems to they're pretending they're not playing the Shula Bowl this week. It's all about Miami. Pete Garcia has been looking forward to that game all year. He can wear his, he always wears his gear, I guess. So he can go there and see both his teams at the same times. But I am kind of worried about that. Let's remember, James Morgan's still a good quarterback. Now, they are very banged up along the O-line. I don't even want to list all their injuries. They have so many. But the one thing that worries me and how FIU can stay in this game, and we're going to talk X's and O's here, is James Morgan still has not turned the ball over a lot. Okay. And we talk about it every week on here, how we give up some passes. If James Morgan gets accurate, starts finding some receivers in man coverage and doesn't make the bad throw, he's good enough where he can carry them in a game. He can get hot and they can get in it, and you know how FIU's offense can get stagnant sometimes. FIU's secondary is still very good. We could talk about the running game all we want, and I think it took a huge step last week, but let's be for real. I mean, we're on fifth string running back. So, I do see an avenue for FIU how they could win this game. Manage our big plays, manage the run game. James Morgan gets hot. They win a lot of one-on-one battles. Yeah.
Again, it's a FIU has had success against FIU, but it's a conference game. FIU certainly can play spoiler, similar to how we did last year against FIU. And it's in a conference game towards the end of the season. You can't take anything for granted. FIU certainly has to be sharp. Again, FIU still has motivation. They beat us. They make it to bowl eligibility, and there's a good chance that they go to a bowl game with only six wins due to the more of the Power Fives having less bowl eligible teams. So they still have a ton. They still have a ton to play for, and it's certainly and kind of fortunate that we have this coming up, because you can kind of tell that this game still means something to FAU players. I don't think they're overlooking it. I think if you haven't been following the alumni, FAU alumni, they've done a really good job. They posted a pretty funny video with the Bachelorette today that you should go check out. But I've seen pictures of former football players, posting their highlights from the Shula Bowl, or posting pictures and captions like, what week it is and stuff like that. So I think the players certainly, they understand not only the importance of the game to potentially move on and keep our hopes alive for CUSA East, but they understand that this is what the rivalry means, basically.
And someone has to do it, because FIU isn't. You can say it's because of their fan base, lack of a culture. I'm not sure what it is. They have done better when it comes to growing their fan base and growing a culture the past couple of years, but it's just unmatched. Shane brought this up, that he couldn't find anything about the FIU student government about doing some sort of tickets for the students, getting a bus together for students, things that FAU does all the time, no matter the opponent inside the state of Florida. And FIU is just saying, oh, well, I hope you guys went to, 3 games so you can get free tickets to see University of Miami at Marlins Park. Just so you guys know, I watched that FIU Old Dominion game. I counted 52 students in the student section.
Yeah, I'm not a big attendance talk person, because, I hope we can get over 15,000 this week.
We don't have much room to talk, but down there, yeah. Come on.
But you just do have a point, and we see this a lot on the Owl's Nest board. I think I said to somebody, anyone who's been part of the Nest for a long time, I think every 2 months in FAU Nest history, someone makes a thread about marketing or ticket sales or how we can do better, and it always dissolves into the same conversation. It's been, well, just win, we can do this. This week, FAU has shown their athletic department how much they're trying, just with simple things. You can't sit here and tell me it's not about marketing. And I've had people text me and saying, they gave extra tickets to donors to give away to this. FAU is making efforts. They might not do everything perfect, but as we've talked about on this podcast before, this athletic department works hard. I love the 12 and 4 deal, not even giving FIU that vacated win, where an FIU fan would have to type in "Go Owls" to get cheaper tickets. It's a genius marketing plan to fill your 2 end zones with cheap tickets. So it's fun. FAU's making big strides. And like you said, the FIU alumni account's been great and the players. So it's great to see that. And it reminds you how far the school has come.
So the slogan, if you haven't seen it, they keep posting that it's just simple math, which is not the first time that they've done that. And I posted this on Twitter that I remember the last time they did the simple math thing, and I think it was maybe it was like I think I may still have the T-shirt, but it was probably like 10-3 or 10-4, and then we added another one to that loss column. So I'm more superstitious than I think most people. So I wasn't happy about that slogan because I knew what happened the last time they used that slogan.
And you know what though is great, and I remember FAU fans. I spent when I first joined the Owl's Nest. I mean, people would always talk about let's create tradition, and I'm always a person. Tradition kind of just happens naturally. It's it kind of like the best recipes. They weren't planning on making it, and it was like boom. The running at the Shula Bowl trophy, the sprinting across the field, usually FAU puts in the opposite corner. Last year, FIU just had it on our sideline, or and the kind of the one that's dissolved where administration says stop, but the players do it anyways, rip the other helmet off.
Yeah. Now they're removable. It's complete. They're completely removable.
Oh, okay. So cool. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's I guess. And there was one year I think if you remember Shalom, the player that they had the FIU helmet and it was in a trash can on campus, but I think one of the coolest traditions FAU has developed in its short football history, one that's cool. I mean, is there any cooler sight than when the clock's counting down with 15 seconds left and the team's all lining up like they're ready to run a 40-yard dash to sprint across the field and grab that trophy? I mean, it's one of the few cool traditions we've developed in this short time. So, I mean that feeling's awesome.
And we've had a lot of times to do it. That's for sure. I noticed that the running across the field normally happens when you're taking it from the other team. So what will happen is that the team that's the defending Shula Bowl champion will have it on the corner of their sideline where they're at. So therefore, it's to the duty of the winning team, if it's going to change hands, to sprint over there, take it from the other team, rip the other helmet off, and throw it in the trash.
So I did kind of want to mention one thing, and we may have talked about this on Sunday, but there hasn't been much more news about BJ Emmons, but things seem to be pointing pretty positively. I didn't get a chance to. I don't think there was anything else posted. Did you guys see anything else about BJ Emmons potentially with, since we are pretty depleted at running back?
BJ Emmons did practice today.
Huh.
I'm a little surprised. I know we're depleted at running back, and I'm surprised for this reason is because you can redshirt BJ this year. Now, our running back situation looking forward, we have a ton of running backs. We took a ton last class. James Meeks, from Dwyer, is still supposed to come in the spring as a gray shirt. So we have tons of, next spring we're going to be talking about being the deepest position. So right now it's very needed, but it is a little thought to be like, why rush him back if he's, and I'm not saying they are rushing him back. I mean, sometimes a broken foot, they just heal, you rebuild the muscle and you kind of get back in football shape. It's not like coming back off a soft tissue injury where it's like you're burning a whole year for, possibly using him the last 3 games. But also if it's to win a Conference USA title, if we really need him versus Louisiana Tech and really need him versus Southern Miss, then it's probably worth it. So what do you guys kind of think of that? I tend to lean more red.
I agree.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, sorry, Dan. If we're in a position where we can win the Conference USA championship game, which Lane Kiffin has always said, especially the past few weeks since we started this win streak, is the goal, that going to the championship game is the goal, then we have to put the best players that can put us in that situation out on the field. I don't know if that means we put them out there against FIU, even if we're struggling. But if Marshall loses, say this weekend, and then we went out going into Southern Miss and we're starting to struggle, especially on the ground, why not? Because he can still be redshirted if he plays a couple more games. At that point, if the dominoes fall, if the stars align, how could it hurt?
Well, what you could do, sorry, Dan. Marshall has a bye this week. They have Louisiana Tech next week when we're on a bye. If we win this week and maybe play him and use him because we're so depleted at running back, we have a bye. Maybe we get a couple of our guys healthy and back. And depending if Marshall wins or loses, we can decide maybe play him UTSA, or maybe, hey, we got a couple of our guys back healthy. Let's shut him down. We used him. We have 3 more games to use him for. So use him for those 3 games and shut him down if you don't need him. So that's just a thought, I had, but who knows how we might play it.
I love that. I love that.
My thinking goes completely is more selfish for BJ Emmons, meaning he kind of said this where he pushed to get back and the trainers were kind of like, whoa. And he may already have it in his mind that he's done. Like, I'm playing because this is my last year in college, done with football.
He's only been in college, so he played his freshman year at Alabama, a year at JUCO, and didn't play anywhere last year. He was at home.
So he was a junior.
True junior. If he decides to go to the NFL this year, you better hope a league starts under that. He doesn't have enough film. He's got to come back next year.
But basically, I would relate it to Jovan Durant, who still had another year and decided to leave because he was done.
Yeah, but Jovan Durant was one of the leaders in Conference USA in receiving, and still get drafted.
I'm basically what I'm saying is that he may have already made up his mind that he's done with school, whether he can make it or not. He may just say, I'm done. So that's what I'm thinking, why he may have pushed to come back so much, and it may be obviously it's in the coach's hands to see if they're going to play him or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if he said, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to
Or he could just be like, I'm going to come back this year and play next year, then be done. Don't redshirt me. I just want to play this year. Like, after next year, I'm done no matter what. So whether I leave after next year as a redshirt junior or a senior, it might not matter. And if he was 87 running backs, we'll have next year, especially a lot of the younger guys, even like Kelvin Dean and Glover Cook, who didn't really see any this year. They're going to start to emerge as backs next year too. So he might say, I don't want to stick around for 2 years of that. So who knows? I don't want to speculate what's in his head. Or he could just be a kid that's just like, I want to come back and help the team. And I feel healthy enough to do that.
Right.
I've met BJ Emmons a couple times at camps. He's a great kid.
Another thing is he could, be working towards getting game ready, kind of go through the process to get game ready, dress, not play, and then he basically, no matter what, he could play because FAU's got, I guess 3 more games in the conference championship and the bowl game. So that would be 4. So we kind of have to see. But he may be going through the process. So what happens after the bye? He doesn't play this game, but after the bye, he's like, all right, I'm ready to go. So we'll see. But yeah, I think now we have Eric Henry from SB Nation joining us to talk FIU. He writes for SB Nation and covers FIU and I think some other stuff. But thanks, Eric. Thanks for being on the show with us, and welcome.
Not a problem, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's not like I don't spend enough time in my life talking to Shane, so I can always make more time to talk to him and the rest of you guys over there at FAU, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and for those that don't know, Shane and Eric do a great podcast called the Shula Bowl podcast, and we can talk more about that later on. But let's kind of get down to the nitty gritty here. So, Eric, for those of us that haven't been kind of keeping up with FIU, I think most of Owl fans tend to always, when they're checking out the scores, they'll tend to see how FIU did. Really, probably just to see if FIU lost. But kind of give us a rundown of how FIU's season has gone so far.
If I had to describe FIU's season in one phrase, I would say stuck in traffic, definitely stuck in neutral. It's been start and go, and they've never quite hit the express lane, very much indicative of I-95 traffic down there. To really break it down into 3 major reasons why the Panthers are 5-4 right now, we got to start with the offensive line, and that's the one where I have to eat the most crow. I definitely thought that this unit, because Alan Mogridge, the offensive line coach, offensive coordinator Rich Skrosky and head coach Butch Davis, they kind of prioritize having depth at the position to the sense where they'll play 8, 9, and 10 guys across the offensive line per game. And they did so last year to the tune of, really good success. They were fourth in FBS football, only allowing 8 sacks last year, and they returned a lot of guys. So I thought that, hey, yes, they lost Jordan Budwig, who's one of the best offensive linemen in CUSA. They also lost a couple seniors who were solid, reliable guys, but nothing special, what I thought. You flip that around. Yes, the team's only allowed 13 sacks, and that's good for third fewest in Conference USA, but James Morgan has spent the entire year under duress. Whether it's been pressures or, hurries, the rushing attack, while if you look at the overall total numbers are still good, the consistency hasn't been there as well. So that's point one. Point two is the run defense, and that's one that I don't think any of us could have imagined would have been just as bad, if not worse, than last year, because it's been an issue for the past year and a half. It's one that, they play well against the UMasses and UTEPs of the world. They did admirably against Charlotte, against one of the better running backs of CUSA and Benny LeMay. But when you play a team that has, quite frankly, the same level of talent, if not more than them, they allow almost 500 yards of rushing, and that's what you saw against Middle Tennessee State, against Tulane, and I believe 260 against Louisiana Tech, so that happens. And then the third thing has just been injuries. They're banged up, and we'll talk about that going on. But this team, even coming out of fall camp, never seemed like they were fully healthy, and that's kind of manifested to where we are today.
Eric, there was a ton of expectations for FIU this season. They were kind of the off-season darling. I believe they were preseason Conference USA East favorites. We've talked about this on the Shula Bowl pod. I mean, what a point, especially with these last 3 games being really difficult. I mean, does it still feel like they can accomplish something this season, or does it already kind of feel like it was a loss season, which I think FAU went through a little bit last year once they realized they weren't winning the East?
That's a really good question, Shane. And there's 2 ways to answer it. If you're asking me personally, I say yes, there's a lot they can accomplish. That huge amount that they can accomplish is qualifying for their 3rd straight bowl appearance, which is something this program has never done. I think people tend to overlook because of the recent success that they've had with Butch Davis, and because of the fact that, they have an ideal location in South Florida and they're supposed to be able to recruit all this great talent. The fact that in their 18 years, they have a win percentage of under 40%. So this program has essentially, they have a history of futility. So the fact that they can have the opportunity to qualify for 3 straight bowl games. Now, we don't know whether 6 wins will get them in or not, but at least if you get to that mark, you put yourself in the game. In my opinion, that's huge. Now, if you ask FIU fans, there's no doubt about it that the level of enthusiasm around this program has dipped ever since the 1-3 start. I mean, no one's going to deny that. It kind of picked back up, heading into the Middle Tennessee State game, thinking like, okay, we've won 3 in a row. We have a chance to get back in there. And then not only losing in the fashion they did, or losing the game, but losing in the fashion that they did, giving up so many rushing yards and the offense kind of falling apart in the second half. That's really kind of killed off any enthusiasm that the fan base kind of has around this team for this year. And there definitely seems to be a little bit of a sense of, all right, let's just get this one. It was a learning experience and move on to next year. But like I said, in my opinion, I think if you have a chance, which you would need to beat FAU, beat Marshall, potentially beat UM, one of those 3 to get to 6 wins. I just think that's huge to build that culture of consistency, and for Butch Davis and the staff to get, a dozen extra practices with the guys for a bowl game and get them through the experience just to keep things going. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Eric, I feel like it's saying how, you kind of as an outsider think the season isn't over. I can kind of feel bad for the FIU fans a little bit because they kind of go into this season with expectations. And your expectations are always a bit higher if you have some sort of emotional investment into the team.
If I'm kind of understanding you correctly, you're saying that, once you lose that emotional investment, and you can relate from last year's, kind of I guess last year for FAU was a bit of a season, kind of like where FIU is this year, where, you come off the conference championship and you think like, all right, we've got great hopes. You had Motor and Kareth White back last year and you're thinking, all right, the sky's the limit. I can understand that, but I don't know if that has as much to do with me being an outsider as much as just kind of, Shane can vouch for this. I'm very much a glass half full guy instead of a glass half empty guy. So I think it has more to do with my own personal perspective, but just also, once again, I think looking at FIU's overall record really drove it home for me. The fact that this team, they haven't had that, history of success. I hate to bring it back to UCF, which for those who are listening is my alma mater, but UCF, outside of the winless years, George O'Leary's first year and George O'Leary's last year, they had a pretty decent standard of success. So when you're a school like that, to kind of regress back to the mean and have a 6 or 7 win year, you say that's a disappointment. But when you're FIU and you're looking to build that culture of consistent success, it doesn't happen overnight. So I think FIU fans have to take that for what it is. And once again, that's not letting the team off the hook. Of course, when you bring back all the starters you do and, an all-conference quarterback like James Morgan, an all-conference linebacker like Sage Lewis, you have high expectations. But I just think you have to look at things in perspective and say, hey, we have a chance to qualify for our 3rd straight bowl game. That's something we haven't done. Typically it's been 1 year of success and then back to 2 wins.
Eric, and we did have this discussion a little bit on the Shula Bowl podcast, but I kind of want to phrase this differently and not so much in means to Bush.
Sure.
I brought up the point that if FAU goes on to win this game, which, right now they're favored to, but it's a rivalry game. You never know what can happen, these things. And FIU just can't get it together these last three games. And FAU goes on and at least plays in the Conference USA title game or goes on to win it and have a successful season. Since, you cover all of Conference USA as well, at that point, the perception between Butch and Lane, each after kind of year 3, do you think kind of from a big picture Conference USA view that the two coaches have really would have separated themselves at this point? And at that point,
Shane, when you phrase it that way, I think it's a really good question. For those of you who want to go back and hear Shane and I's previous debates, you can go back and listen to the Shula Bowl. I think the way Shane phrased it here makes it interesting. To answer your question, specificity, do I think the perception of Butch versus Lane takes a hit? It's something that after our last podcast, I had to step back and think about a little bit. Maybe I'm biased because I cover Butch. I don't want to say the perception takes a hit because Butch Davis, he's kind of regarded like the Doc Holliday's and Rick Stockstills of the world, especially if you go to Conference USA Media Days, the way they talk about them, kind of like, and I mean this respectfully, the elder statesmen of CUSA, the guys who are solid football coaches and really good football men. But where I do have to give you credit and give your point credence is this. When you take a step back and you look at it, in 3 years, should FAU run the table and win the East, obviously going to need some help with a Marshall loss. But let's say, for example, FAU wins the East, right? And they go to the conference title game. They don't have to win it, but let's just say they win the East. That would be 2 East championships in 3 years. Whereas for FIU, they would have, 2 bowl games, but not quite the same level of success as FAU. So do I think there might be a slight separation? I don't know if that would be the perception among Conference USA coaches, so to speak, but I can absolutely see the point that you're making, that there might be that perception among, maybe the lay person. I would say to give, kind of really put meat to your point, if we're having this discussion again next year, then I would say you might really start to see that separation. But it's just not a feeling that I got from Conference USA coaches going to media days. The way they speak about, Butch Davis, like I said, it's the same way they talk about Rick Stockstill and Doc Holliday is kind of being the elder statesman and the really well-respected guys in conference.
I guess also just in kind of my thinking along with that, and it's a little different, and also just kind of with Owl fans in regards to Lane, a second East title in 2 years, even kind of with the disappointing season. And we've talked about that was mostly just a lot of close FAU losses, not very similar to what FIU struggled with, some bad losses this year. But, I think Lane probably at that point separates himself in that top 3 splitting hairs of Conference USA coaches. Would you argue that's correct? I mean, fully established himself in that top three, no matter who you kind of want to mix in there.
You're saying should FAU go ahead and win the East this year, correct?
Yeah. Lane would unquestionably be a top 3 coach in Conference USA.
He's there now.
Yeah. I'm right. I go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, no, Jack. I think for FAU fans, it's a good point. But and this is curious, and I'm kind of going back to a lot of summer writing where I remember there was an SB Nation article they ranked the coaches, and Lane was like 5th, and it seemed like Bill Clark was ahead, and I think UAB. I've had my thoughts on Bill Clark in the past, but it seemed like Lane was down there. Now everyone kind of had a different view of him. He had 2 very different seasons. Now 2 out of 3, and you look at the middle season as more of an aberration. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, so I just he would have to be in the top 3 basically, based upon where he is now and what he's done now. And then, like Shane was saying, if he wins the East, then do you think there's any debate to it, Eric?
No, I mean, I would have to agree. And to the point that Shane was making about Lane having been, I think the article had him as like 6th or 5th or something like that. I wonder how much of that has to do with a Lane bias. And we all know, I mean, this is a FAU podcast, so I'm sure you guys are all familiar with kind of the inherent Lane bias there is, because you don't think of him just squarely with FAU, right? You think about the missteps at USC, you think about the things at Tennessee, and then you say, all right, that guy's all flash and no substance, and you rank him 5th behind a Bill Clark, who maybe you have an inherent bias to like Bill Clark more because he wrote things out at UAB and things of that nature. Shane and I disagree on Bill Clark. I think he's done a phenomenal job, but no. To answer that, absolutely. I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. If I were to give you 3, you got to have Skip Holtz in there because Skip Holtz has been consistent. You got to have, you got to have Doc Holliday in there as well. You're going to have Bill Clark, and then you're going to have your mainstays, right? Guys who are really respected, like Rick Stockstill. Seth Luttrell before this year is a guy who absolutely would have been considered top 3. But no, if for my money, I'm putting Lane Kiffin top 3. Should they? Even without, even if they don't go and win the East, I would put them top 3, but absolutely so if they go and win the East this year.
Oh, man, poor Frank Wilson at UTSA, man. I really thought he'd be in there in that top 3.
Yeah, old Frank Wilson's got bigger issues than worry about being in his top 3 with a new AD down there in Lisa Campos, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, exactly. So before we finish up, guys, Eric, you've done a great job of covering FIU this year for Underdog Dynasty, and I want to say good job with that.
Appreciate it.
SB Nation.
Of course, man, of course. And you guys talked a bit about this on this week's episode of the Shula Bowl podcast, but how much of FIU even being in bowl contention has to do with that weak strength of schedule?
So once again, this is a point that Shane will appreciate, right? Because I kind of fought him tooth and nail on this last year.
I didn't feed him that question.
Yeah, right. So I am a believer in whoever's on your schedule. You can't control the fact that, take, for example, North Texas this year, right? Everyone thought that North Texas was going to be, far and away win the East. Everyone thought that FIU, the media vote actually had Marshall winning the East. So that was right. They had FIU coming in 2nd. But everyone thought that FIU would be a good team this year. So if you had both North Texas and FIU on your schedule, you can't control the fact that they didn't play well. Now, to Shane's point, I can't hide from it again for a second year in a row. The fact that you have wins over UTEP and ODU, it is what it is. So how much of the fact that they are in bowl contention has to do with the fact that they haven't beaten the best of teams? It has a lot to do with it. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. For the past 2 seasons, I wrote about it a ton last year. When FIU had a chance to step up and take that next step, right, and beat someone who had equal talent to them or better, they whiffed outside of the bowl game. You lose to Marshall at home with a chance to win the division. You lose on opening day to Indiana. Obviously the Miami game, you're not really expecting that one, but you don't get it. So, you lose to FAU when you're supposed to – that's kind of supposed to be your crowning game where it's the Shula Bowl and you're on your way to win the division and you get blown out, right? So, yeah, that's absolutely something that you have to look at. And I guess to spin it forward, I would wonder, is it a matter of them playing down to their competition or just not being good enough? That's a question I can't answer right now because I'm squarely in the camp that they have enough talent, but that talent hasn't manifested itself into wins against the top tier competition, whether it's CUSA or out of conference. So it's absolutely a point that is worth considering.
Save for maybe Louisiana Tech, because I'm with the FIU fans on Twitter about that one. That the officiating in that one is a bit rough. But at the same time, a great team that's projected by media and coaches to finish 1 or 2nd in the East should be able to find ways to overcome officiating. It's the same thing I said to our fans at home after the Marshall game. If we really want to be one of the big boys, we got to be able to, fight off bad officiating mistakes. So.
Well,
Yeah,
Eric,
go for it. Go for it.
Finish your thought.
I just was going to say really quickly, I agree with you. If you are one of those top teams, then you'll find a way to win. The refs, unless it's like a New Orleans Saints, LA Rams deal like last year where, they blow the call that egregiously, and it puts the team in field goal range to win the game, you should find a way to win. So agreed.
Yeah, but one campaigning to another, were you really upset to see the Saints lose like that? Were you really upset? I wasn't.
I was not upset to see the Saints lose. I got to confess that. We're long-suffering Bucs fans, so yeah, I wasn't mad at that.
All right. Well, Eric, we greatly appreciate you being on with us, providing some insight on and off the field for FIU. So if there are FIU fans that want to kind of continue to follow you along, what's the best way to reach you?
Sure, guys. Once again, appreciate you guys for having me on. It's always fun getting to come on, with the quote-unquote opposing team, even though I know most of you guys. So that's always fun. But if you want to follow my work, you can find me on Twitter at @EricCHenry_. That's Eric, ERIC. And if you want to follow my articles, you can find me. Some of the stuff does get aggregated up to the main SB Nation website, but primarily you can find me at UnderdogDynasty.com. Some of the stuff makes it to MSN.com, so you can find it, basically across your internet platforms. And then also the Shula Bowl podcast at Shula Bowl Pod on Twitter, brought to you by 5 Reasons Sports.
And don't forget, I love the Conference USA podcast. Anyone who wants to listen to that and get like the full rundown of weekly Conference USA on the Underdog Dynasty. So thank you, Eric. Yeah, we're gonna talk every day this week. One or another.
Shane and I are literally best friends at this point, man. I mean, we've had beer together. We drink. We don't drink every day, but we talk every day. So, yeah, I talk to him more than I do my own brother at this point. So, it is what it is.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being on with us, and yeah, may the best Owl team win on Saturday.
Hopefully, I'll see you guys out there Saturday. Appreciate it, guys. Anytime. All
right. Thanks. All right. Well, that wraps up this episode. We thank Eric for being on with us, and as always, Shane and Jack. And so Shula Bowl number 18 this Saturday, 6 p.m. Hopefully going to have some great weather coming in. I think every weatherman I follow on Twitter, because, yes, I follow weathermen on Twitter, has said Florida fall could start. I won't be at the game, unfortunately. I'll be out of town. But you can check the game out on Stadium, which I'm pretty excited about because I really enjoyed the Stadium broadcast. They were way more reliable than ESPN Plus, that's for sure. So make sure you check us out on Twitter, obviously, at Inside the Burrow, FAUOwlsNest.com for all the forum chatter and news and notes there. And, yeah, we hope to be talking next week about the 13th win in the Shula Bowl history for FAU. So we will talk to you guys later, and always thanks for supporting us, and go Owls.